Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the August 6th Post-Fall City Council meeting. Rhiannon, please note that Councilors Shove, Westland, Ziegler, and Stigliter are present. Councilors Malloy and Walker are excused tonight. We do not have any ceremonies, announcements, or presentations, and we do need an amendment to the agenda.
I move to amend the agenda to remove item 1E, 3B, and the executive session from tonight's meeting.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Stigliter.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you both. Do we have any declarations of conflict tonight? Would you please present the consent calendar?
Item A is minutes, the July 16th, 2024 City Council meeting. Item B is payables 7/18 through 8/6/2024. And item C is the May Cash and Investments Report. Item D is Prairie Trail Improvement Agreement Addendum Number 1.
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second. Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Stigliter,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Motion passes. Tonight we have no public hearings, which brings us to unfinished business, returning ordinances and resolutions. The first item is the Water Reclamation Facility Biosolids Hopper and Biofilter Modifications Project. Construction Contract Award. You got up there pretty fast. You really were.
You got to my agenda very fast. Agenda item very fast. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Craig Bornpole. I'm the Utilities Manager for the City of Post Falls. And I'm coming before you tonight to seek authorization to award a construction contract for our solids hopper and biofilter improvements construction project. As a bit of an overview, this is a view of the water reclamation facility, and the areas that we're talking about are a couple support features that we have at the water reclamation facility. The solids hopper is kind of centrally on the west side of the facility, and then our biofilter, which is trying to reduce odors, is right up along Celtice Road. So that's the areas where the facilities are located. As a bit of a review of where we've come from, talked about this project several times. So I'm going to try and keep it a little bit brief tonight, but wanted to remind you where we had come from. So our original project was limited just to the solids hopper. We designed improvements to that facility to improve operations, reduce maintenance inputs from staff, and we put that out for informal bid based on what we were hoping the bids to come back at. All of the bids came back higher than the Idaho Code threshold for awarding a bid that way, and staff recommended rejecting all of the bids. And in doing so, we decided to increase the scope as well to do some work on that biofilter that we had talked about. So, evidence, we've been talking about this for a little while. I kept my snowy photo of our biosolids hopper. This is a load-out facility. We send our biosolids to a third-party contract operator who reuses those biosolids. But we store them in this hopper building before they pick them up. And we've had some operational difficulties with these. Talked with our engineer and designed some modifications to account for those. Really, we're trying to isolate the hopper so it's not coming out onto the ground after that contract operator leaves. So we're going to add some knife valves to this auger and isolate those further within the building. Our biofilter is, like I said, it's intended to reduce odors. We're blowing the foul air through, distributing it through what are bark chips that have some biosolids on it. Allows for growth of a bacteria that utilize that foul air as their food source, basically, to reduce those odors. That media breaks down over time. This facility has been online for about 8 years now, and that bark gets old. The effectiveness reduces, so we need to replace that media. We've also observed some issues with the distribution piping. So while we're in there, we're going to do a bit of work to try and get a better distribution of that foul air as it goes through the chips. So that's the portion that we added most recently to this project scope, and then went out for formal bids where any qualified contractor could bid on it. We received 2 bids back. The low bid was from Apollo Inc. at $481,040.45. The project would be funded through our odor solids and dewatering project budget with the budget code there. The bids were reviewed by our engineer for conformance with the design specifications. They recommended award. Bid was also reviewed by our legal counsel for conformance with Idaho standards and Post Falls procurement standards to make sure it met those as well. And they confirmed that it does meet those standards. So our recommendation is to award the construction contract to Apollo Inc. at $481,040.45.
2 questions.
Yes.
You rejected the bids previously because they were too high. And I understand you increased the scope of the project, but are you comfortable with the dollar amount that the bids came in at, or was that within your estimate?
It is, maybe even, we're very comfortable with the way the numbers came back. I think this is a good bid. We're excited to see this bid number.
Okay. Second question, I had a citizen stop me the other day at a store and say that they were driving by the plant and actually has a daughter living there, he says, and the odor has been somewhat noticeable lately. Do you think that will be addressed with the replacement of the biofilter?
We're always seeking to address odors. The biofilter was something, that has been online for 8 years. We've been working there for 40 years. So the biofilter originally was brought online to try and address odors. The media has met its end of useful life. So replacing it, I do think will address the odors.
Good, thank you. Any other questions, Craig?
And I just wanted to clarify, the initial bids were too high for the informal bidding process,
Gotcha.
which triggered us to go through the formal bidding process.
Thank you, Craig. Anyone want to make a motion?
I move to approve action item A, WRF Biosolids Hopper and Biofilter Modifications Project Construction Contract Award.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Rhiannon, please take the roll.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader. Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next item up is the Spokane Street Rehabilitation Contract Change Order 1 to extend paving limits.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Andrew Arbini, Projects Division Manager for Public Works. My presentation this evening is the change order with Interstate to extend the paving limits as part of the Spokane Street Rehabilitation Project in agreement with ITD. So following contract award, ITD reached out to the city with some interest in extending the paving limits to address some much needed maintenance work within their jurisdiction, their responsibility to maintain. Last month, I presented an agreement with ITD, and that authorized ITD to pay the city a lump sum amount of $700,000. Following authorization, the city and the city's design consultant, Welch Comer, negotiated a contract change with the city's contractor, Interstate Concrete and Asphalt. Total cost of the change is just over $421,000, and it adds 7 days to the project schedule. That first line is the total amount of the change order. Staff is requesting a 10% contingency for this work. Previous agreements authorized as part of this work, the engineering and CMS task with Welch Comer, you can see that's listed there. Total amount for this work with ITD is about $554,000 and would be paid for out of that lump sum payment made by ITD as part of the agreement. The area in red on the screen is the portion of work in discussion this evening. This is the ITD portion. The area in yellow is the city's original Spokane Street project, which is largely funded through the Strategic Initiatives Grant that was awarded to the city earlier this year. So total cost for each section of work that we anticipate to see. That includes all project-related costs, including a contingency. Those are listed there. Total project cost would be about $1.8 million. We met with the contractor last Friday, had a pre-construction meeting, and their planned start date is September 3rd. So that is the Tuesday following Labor Day weekend. Plan to start work. Expected completion is by November of this year. A few things to note. There will be impacts. The public can expect impacts, and specifically traffic revisions to include detours around the project site, and also I-90 ramp closures. That will include eastbound and westbound closures intermittently to accomplish the work, specifically through the ITD corridor. As a way to mitigate, the contractor plans to do some of this work at night, still working through the details of that, but we anticipate day and nighttime work. And then as the project progresses, we will be publishing notices and project updates. We plan to do that through the city's website and social media outlets. So that wraps up my presentation. I will stand for any questions you have.
Andrew, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
$700,000 from ITD. We spend $553. They only pay $553, right? Or we can't get the balance of that and apply it to our project?
It's a great question. That is not clearly defined in the agreement, and that is something that we will revisit with ITD.
I will lean towards the latter. So,
Lump sum payment is lump sum.
lump sum payment, yeah. And then the second question, November completion, isn't that getting late for the asphalt batch plants?
We are bumping into the end of the year. Looking at their most recent schedule, paving and striping is showing late October.
Okay.
The original project timeframe and the contract documents included a cutoff date of end of October. The current schedule revision that encompasses the ITD work is just into early November, wrapping up. You'd have paving work completing in October with
Okay.
other work on the project finishing early November. That is the plan.
Okay. Questions?
Is this being done by a different, like, group of contractors than what's being done at the 43 exchange, or the 41, sorry?
It is.
Okay. Do they have any intention of working together so that we don't have no exits or on-ramps from, would that be Pleasant View to Northwest?
Yeah, I didn't, that's a very good question. I didn't get into the specifics of that. When this conversation started with ITD, that was one of the no-go situations. If we were not able to close the Spokane Street ramps, ITD communicated to us that the 41 and I-90 interchange project will take precedent, and they do have intermittent closures planned. We have reached out to the contacts at ITD over the last several months when we started working on this with a different contact at ITD, getting everybody in the same conversation that it appears we can work through the timing of that, but we will be in close contact, and ultimately ITD would have the final say on whether we would be able to close ramps at Spokane Street and how that's impacting the timing of closures that may be occurring at 41 90 interchange.
So there will be some sort of oversight that is looking at both projects to determine who gets to close and who doesn't. So we can be assured that not both of those will be down at the same time, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And if we were not able to accomplish this work, we had that conversation with ITD as well, that if that situation were to occur where we could not close the ramps or be able to have the city's contractor work in the area between the eastbound ramps and Southeast Way, that may have to be postponed, or we'd have to revisit that with ITD at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we'll floor the motion.
I move to approve action item C, Spokane Street Rehabilitation Contract Change Order 1 to extend paving limits.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Stigleader. Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next item up is amendment number 1 to development agreement point zone change.
I think the first item is the budget resolution.
Whoops. I skipped, sorry, my apologies. No wonder Jason didn't get up there.
Jason's-
I knew we'd skip when I was thinking it was in this section. My apologies. First item under new business, fiscal year 2025 budget resolution.
Which at first I thought you were messing with me because you looked right at me, so.
I was. I'd like to say I was, Jason, I just missed it.
All right, Mayor and Council, tonight what I'm asking for is approval of a resolution. The resolution is for the, so I can advertise for the budget that's upcoming. The budget hearing will be on August 20th. We'll have the budget hearing at that time, the fee hearing, and also we'll be discussing foregone at that time as well. So that's all, this resolution gets the advertising going so we can start the kickoff.
And this is a high water mark,
This is
right?
high water mark, correct?
With this motion, we're not agreeing to any of the specifics that are
No.
within the budget, correct?
Nope, this is strictly just for advertising. This, what Idaho requires is it shows the actual of the 2 years prior, the current budget that we're in, and then the proposed budget that we're gonna set the high water mark for, and that's just for advertising to get the kickoff going.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
you're welcome.
I move to approve fiscal year 2025 budget resolution.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Now we're to the amendment, addendum number 1, development agreement, point zone change. Mr. Paulus.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Robert Paulus, City Engineer. Tonight, staff is asking for your consideration and for the approval of addendum number 1 to the point zone change development agreement. Back in 2022, City Council entered into an agreement with Wadsworth Development Group for a zone change, which is shown on the map as phases 1 and phases 2. In that development agreement, Phase 2 was converted from industrial to CCM zoning on 45 acres, and it had a specific requirement of no multifamily on that section. In the area of Phase 1, which is just under 16 acres of land, there was an allowance for multifamily. Within the development agreement, Article 3 had brought up some specific areas of concern that staff had or that the city had regarding wastewater. In particular, we were concerned that the peak flows from the multifamily could have some adverse impacts on the Fiscal lift station. And so in that agreement, we required that the developer, before moving forward with any multifamily, would complete a sewer study, and that they would then be allowed, after the completion of that study, to get building permits and then move forward with certificates of occupancy upon completion of those improvements. In 2023, FLT, they had bought the property from Wadsworth. They wanted to move forward with the multifamily aspect. They sat down with us. We scoped out a sewer study, which they completed in late 2023, along with a traffic study, but the germane issue was the sanitary sewer study. In that study, they took a look at the build-out area of the Fiscal lift station and what the impacts of multifamily would be. The study came back and identified some impacts that needed to be addressed. So the Fiscal lift station itself, and this is a picture of the Fiscal lift station right by that little yellow box in the hole, had a design capacity of 500 gallons per minute. Its current operating capacity is at 395 gallons per minute, or about 80% of its design. In 2022, before stuff really started building out there, when it was just Walmart, Cisco, Cabela's for the most part, peak flows were about 36 gallons per minute, and there was one multifamily development in operation at that time out there. At the projected build-out for the Cisco lift station, with this 16-acre land being multifamily, we'd see the peak flows of about 452 gallons per minute with the project. If the multifamily did not go in and it stayed as commercial lands, we would anticipate about 436 gallons per minute. Not a huge change. However, the city operates under taking the anticipated peak flow and then increasing that by 20% so that we have a factor of safety in there, or a reserve capacity. So we were looking at a required design capacity of 550 gallons per minute. Taking a look at that and then taking a look at what we had for infrastructure where we were with or without the project. The report identified there was both some private as well as some public responsibilities. One, we had pumps in there which were operating at 395 gallons per minute. It was designed for 500. Those pumps are also getting to the point where they need to either be retrofitted or replaced and upgraded anyway. There were some design standard considerations. Normally, when we exceed 500 gallons per minute, we require 3 pumps in the lift station and some other improvements to be done. This site has some existing limitations as to it being in a hole and some difficulties with the amount of land that we have to expand. So we had to take a look and discuss, is there some flexibility in our standards? Are we able to accommodate that additional multifamily in a way that's reasonable and still protects the health and safety of the public? So we entered into negotiations with the developer, and it included staff from the Public Works Department as well as the Engineering Division. And that brings forward the addendum before you this evening. Within that addendum, it preserves the original agreement from 2022, and it specifically updates section 3.3, looking at those issues of what's the private and what's the public involvement. First, we're requiring that before the developer moves forward with getting its building permits, that it perform a preliminary engineering report. What that means is they are going to take the report and the identified 550 gallon per minute pump that we said they need. They're going to do a study and find a pump that meets that criteria. We would have the developer, when we reach an agreement as to what that pump is, the developer would be responsible for providing 1 pump to the city, and the city would be responsible for acquiring 2 additional pumps of the same size. The developer would be responsible for identifying any electrical upgrades that are needed at that lift station to handle that higher speed pump, and they would also be responsible for installing those electrical upgrades if any are needed. The other item that is required, and this is typical for a lift station that has more than 500 gallons per minute on it, the force mains leading from the lift station would need to have flow meters installed. With the completion of a preliminary engineering report, we would then be in a position where the city would be able to issue building permits for the development, and then we would withhold any certificates of occupancy until the developer provides us the additional pump, completes the electrical upgrades, and completes the flow meter installation. So again, this evening, city staff is asking for your consideration and for your approval of this addendum to the development agreement. I stand for any questions you might have.
So basically, this is something that was approved a couple years ago, and what we're doing now is just making sure that the infrastructure, wastewater, is capable or meeting the standards as required.
That is correct, and we're providing a cleaner route forward than the original agreement had, and on how to move forward and make sure that the city is protected in getting these improvements, whereas previously the developer, with the completion of their study, right now they're in a position where they could push the issue and say, hey, the agreement says we can get building permits. That probably isn't in their best interest either, because they'd be entering into a realm of unknown costs. This provides, I think, a stopgate where they go through, do the preliminary engineering report, and know how expensive it really is before they pull building permits.
So we have 2 pumps on the lift station now, and we need to go to 3 for the capacity, right?
So there isn't room in the existing wet well to put 3 pumps in there. So the reason you see 2 pumps by the city and 1 pump by the developer, it's a little bit of a compromise. When you do a lift station, what you want is, if it's a 2-pump configuration, either pump has to be able to handle the peak flows. If you go to a 3-pump configuration, your 2 weakest pumps have to be able to handle any of the flows. So in this case, what we're doing is saying, okay, either pump can handle the ultimate flows, but we have a spare at the wastewater treatment plant. So if something goes wrong, we can get a replacement pump out there relatively quick, whereas otherwise you have a pump out of service and it could be days or weeks or longer before you get the correct pump back in place.
Okay, so if a pump fails, then it would be temporarily shut down?
No. A lift station has 2 pumps, so
Yeah.
if one pump goes down, the other one can handle it. And in this case, if one pump goes down, we'd be able to get the spare from the wastewater treatment plant, come out and replace it in a shorter period of time, and then get the one that's not working fixed. And then we don't have the risk of having only one pump. Well, the converse way is looking at it is if you have two pumps, one's down and you don't have a spare, you're sitting there with only one pump in operation for you're not sure how long, and that's a risk.
Okay, so that's why we need to upgrade the pumps to be able to
Yes.
handle that. Otherwise, the existing pumps wouldn't be able to do it at the new capacity on their own if one fails,
Yeah.
right?
And, you know, in the earlier slide, we were showing around 450 gallons per minute as what the peak flow is going to be. A 500 gallon per minute pump can handle it, but the reason we're at 550 is we put in that pump, 5 years from now, that pump's worn out a little bit, it's lost some of its efficiency. We're still able to handle those peak flows.
Okay.
Do we have cost estimates of a 550 gallon per minute pump?
I do not have a
Those two.
cost estimate for you at that time, or at this time. That's one of the reasons for the preliminary engineering report that they have to do is they find the pump, find what the cost is, and then we can,
So when we determine that cost, will that amount then be presented to council again for approval, or is that part of what we're deciding tonight?
I believe that would come out of the replacement funds that the Water Reclamation Department has for maintaining the existing pumps that are there.
John's nodding.
And I've got John Beecham who can provide a better answer, but
The answer was yes?
Yes, it'd come back.
So it's within your department discretion?
I'm sorry, excuse me 1 minute. You said it would come back?
It would.
Come on up, I'm sorry. I thought you meant yes, it would just come out of the fund.
Good evening, Council. John Beecham, Public Works Director. Given my guess at what these pumps would cost, we would likely be coming to you to ask for permission to buy them. I think they'd be upwards of $50,000.
Yeah, outside of
Okay.
your, yeah.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other questions?
Is there a reason that this isn't a public hearing? If we're making, if we're changing the development agreement that was agreed to during a public hearing? For a zone change?
So we're not modifying the original agreement, we're just adding an addendum to that agreement.
Okay. And then I guess it does, but I'm gonna ask anyway. It seems reasonable to you that 16 acres of multifamily, presumably 3 stories, has the same amount of wastewater needs, roughly the same amount of wastewater needs as 16 acres of commercial?
So, yes, it does. One, we run it through our model, which takes a look at the land uses, and in this case, the model put in specifically 300 additional residential units of multifamily. And that's where it came up with the numbers. Now, there are some rule of thumb numbers which I utilize. They came back in the same ballpark, but I would trust the model a little bit more than the rule of thumb numbers. You know, typically you average or you take a look at an industrial area of having the equivalent of 4 single-family homes per acre of land. But then you have peaking factors which occur, which depending upon the time of day will increase the amount of flow. And one of the things you're going to find is that on commercial use, you can have some intense uses, but those flows generally start at a certain time in the morning around 8 o'clock. They start up and then they're constant throughout the day until the business closes and then they go down. Residential uses, what we tend to see is a little bit of a higher peak during the AM peak hour when people are getting up, taking showers, getting ready for school, work, whatever. And then you also see another peak in the later evening time. And so what I typically anticipate is, yes, you are going to see a little bit higher use from that multifamily use, but that's because you got that short little peak that's just happening a little bit higher than the more average and constant flow from commercial.
I'm so sorry. My very non-wastewater intuition says that commercial would be much less than multifamily, so to only see like a 20-point difference seemed odd to me.
That depends what type of commercial you put in an area. We utilize averages. Averages for multifamily, we're really comfortable with. Averages for single-family residential, we're really comfortable with. In a commercial area, we tend to take a little bit more aggressive or assume a higher flow coming out of commercial areas, because a fast food restaurant is going to be the equivalent of 8 single-family homes, but a fast food restaurant doesn't use up much more land than about 2 homes. If you put in a car wash, one of the more recent car washes in our community utilizes well over 1 million gallons of water a month. So it somewhat depends upon what the uses are. One of the saving factors in this area as well is you have, in the background of that picture is a large industrial storage building. That uses almost 0 flow when compared to a single-family residential. So in a way, I'd say the developer lucked out a little bit in that some of the development that's out there, you know, you take a look, Cisco Foods, Walmart, and Cabela's, between the 3 of them, plus a 100-unit multifamily site, which is just north of Cisco, they were utilizing less than 40 gallons per month in 2022. That in some ways seems low, but there's things that go on in the pipe system which can affect that as well.
Gotcha. And can you explain the ramifications of not making this addendum?
What was that?
Can you explain the ramifications of not making this addendum as far as getting their certification of occupancy or their building permits
Well,
that you alluded to?
if this addendum is not made per the agreement that's in place, the developer could move forward and get their building permits at this point. However, they would still be responsible for putting together and completing all of the improvements that were identified in the agreement. The difference would be that we would have no agreement and the city wouldn't be doing anything towards the pump upgrades.
But they would still be required to make upgrades to the pump because of the increase in usage. It's just that we're not doing it before they get their building permits.
So,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, if you take the letter of the agreement, they would be responsible for all of the improvements. But
Including what we're talking about today.
yes.
Okay.
The difference is that we took a look at it and recognized that there is some responsibility of the city towards the upgrades at the lift station. And that, in this case, was taking our existing pumps that are not working at the 500 gallons per minute and replacing those. You know, today, if this didn't move forward, give it 10 or 15 years, we would still be having to replace those pumps and getting them back to 500 gallons per minute, whether that meant a rebuild or a new pump.
Which we're still going to have to replace in 5 to 10 years, even if we get new ones today with this multifamily.
Yes, pumps have a
Right.
shelf life on them.
Okay.
Questions? Anyone want to float a motion?
Let's see here. I would move to approve action item B, addendum number 1 to development agreement, point zone change, RZNE-0001-2022.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Westland,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Stigleader,
No.
Shove.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item up, Quarry Sports Complex.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Robbie Quinn, Parks Planner, here this evening seeking council and mayor's approval to apply for the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant for Phase 1 of the Quarry Sports Complex, previously known as the Tullamore Sports Complex. Just kind of go over. So Phase 1 is essentially looking at doing 2 of the multi-use fields, 1 parking lot, a shelter and plaza right here, with 2 add alternates for the playground and the sports courts. So what we're looking at doing is applying for $1.25 million in grant funding The project total base bid estimate is about $5 million, so that would leave us obligated with the grant at $3.75 million. And then depending on kind of where, if we're awarded, we put it out to bid, where the bids come in. If those alternates are within our funding, we would accept those at that point. So that's kind of where we're at. If there are any questions for phase one.
Robbie, the 3 point whatever million, is that in our impact fees
Impact
for
fees,
construction?
correct. Yes, correct.
It's been planned for, correct?
Yep. So currently we have about 5.9 in impact fees. About 1.5, 1.6 is already taken with Black Bay and some of our other projects, leaving us with about 4.3, 4.4 at this time. And this would likely be about another year from now as well.
Okay.
By the, Black Bay took us 3 years to get approval, so hopefully this doesn't take that long, but if it does, it could push project too.
Sure. Okay, any questions?
Move to approve Quarry Sports Complex LWCF grant application.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Robbie. Next item on the agenda is citizens' issues, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding city-related issues that are not on the agenda. If anyone wishes to speak, come forward. Seeing none. Administrative staff reports. State Transportation Investment Program Overview.
Good evening again, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Again, Robert Paulus, City Engineer. Each year, the state of Idaho updates their state transportation investment program. And in preparing it, each July, they publish the program for public comment, and then it gets adopted in October, or in September for October being in effect. This lays out projects that the state of Idaho is doing, along with local jurisdictions that involve federal and state funding and are managed by either LTAC or the state of Idaho itself. Tonight I'm going to give you an overview of that program, in particular how it impacts District 1, which is the 5 northern counties of the state of Idaho, and the city of Post Falls itself. When the program comes out, city staff takes a look at the program. We review it for the projects that we have on there, making sure that our projects aren't dropped, that the years of construction do not change adversely, and that if we had requested any funding, that the amount of funding is still correct or additional funding was properly added to it. The program looks at a basically 7-year window, and the newest edition is looking at fiscal years 2025 to fiscal year 2031. In Idaho District 1 for the next 7 years, they are going to be expending just under $600 million. A bulk of that, 95% of that dollars, is for construction. 3% is for development, that's initial design of the projects. And then about 2% of it is for right-of-way acquisition. The sources of funding that come about for this, about $377.7 million, or 60% of that funding, is from federal dollars. 39% of it is from state dollars, and another $4.1 million is from other sources. A bulk of that other sources is the local match dollars that local jurisdictions provide for the dollars that they get. When you take a look at the state of Idaho is in some ways a lucky state in that because of the amount of federal lands in the state of Idaho and its population, that for every dollar a person spends in the state of Idaho on gas tax, the state of Idaho gets a greater number of dollars back. The state of Idaho then allocates those dollars to the Idaho Transportation Department and the local jurisdictions. In addition, because of that status, when the city of Post Falls has a project that's managed by the state of Idaho, we pay 7.34 cents on the dollar towards that project. So for a $1 million project, we'd pay $73,400 towards the construction. In other states, that amount usually starts at a 20% match. So there's a little bit of benefit in that. Looking at projects that we have going on, first starting with projects that are the City of Post Falls or that we are directly involved with. The Chase Road BNSF Railroad Crossing, it is scheduled for construction in 2025 next year with a $1.2 million cost. This project will upgrade and improve the railroad crossing of Chase Road over by the elementary school, improve and put in missing segments of pedestrian crossings, and update the school zone itself. We applied for and were awarded the grant for this project in 2019. As of last year, had I made this presentation to you, you would have seen me commenting that we finally got a construction year of 2028 for this project. And luckily, a couple of other projects fell behind in the state, and so they asked if we'd be willing to have this project moved up to 2025 construction. We were very glad to do that. Right now, we are working with the railroad and trying to finalize an agreement, which will come before you in the future, but that is for allowing the railroad to do the improvements on the rail crossing itself. There is no right-of-way acquisition in that project, and the construction plans are complete except for the agreement with the railroad. The other project that we have going on in the city is the Prairie Avenue widening from Meyer to State Highway 41. This project is a Post Falls Highway District project. However, the City of Post Falls participated with the Highway District in the application and has financial obligations towards that project as well. It was granted in 2019, and in this past year, they were able to get a construction year of that project for 2028. That project will put in missing curb and gutter and widen widen Prairie Avenue from Meyer Road to State Highway 41 to a 5-lane road, complete the 2 roundabouts, and put in the missing pedestrian facilities along that route. This year, we also had another project which showed up. Post Falls Highway District was the applicant because it is outside of the city's boundary. However, the city has been closely involved with the development of the project to date, and that's the Prairie Trail Underpass, and that's a $1.5 million carbon offset grant. It has no match on it, so that's a unique one, but that will put a bicycle path underneath Prairie Avenue to allow for safer transit of vehicles on the Prairie Trail. That project, the preliminary plans were just turned into the city on Monday, and they will be going out to staff tomorrow for review and comment in the very near future, with the hope of constructing it in 2025. Looking a little bit farther out of the area, up north on Lancaster Road between Rathdrum and Hayden, you have the Lancaster-Hutter Roundabout, which is scheduled for construction next year. Sponsors Lakes Highway District, and that's a $1.8 million roundabout. Also immediately to the south of it, just a few hundred feet, is the Hutter Union Pacific Railroad crossing, and Post Falls Highway District will be doing about $400,000 worth of improvements to that railroad crossing to make it safer. Also in 2028, you have the Hayden and Meyer roundabout that is being designed in concurrence with the Prairie Avenue widening project I just talked about. Plans for that project are done, and it is just waiting to get final approval so that it can be ready to go out to bid once the dollars are finally obligated. Going over to the Highway 53 corridor, we've got a lot going on over the next few years. This last year, the Idaho Transportation Department was able to get a $45 million grant from the federal government to move forward with the Pleasant View interchange. This interchange will help with safety and reduce congestion. Last time that we had discussions with with the Burlington Northern Railroad at that area, they estimated that the gates are down about 6 hours a day at that crossing. So having a overcrossing and then a full interchange on the 53 will be a great improvement. Then between 2029 and 2030, ITD will be making other improvements on Highway 53 between State Line to Hauser Lake Road, and then Bruss Road to milepost 8.3, where they will be putting in center turn lanes, widening the shoulders, and putting in roadway illumination to improve safety. Another project happening in the area is over in the city of Coeur d'Alene, and that is their Ramsey Road signal upgrades, where they will be updating signal equipment and interconnecting the traffic signals between Kathleen and Prairie Avenue at $1.1 million, and that's scheduled for 2027. And then the bulk of the $600 million that ITD is going to be spending in the next 7 years is actually right in the I-90 corridor. It accounts for a little bit less than half of that $600 million. This year, originally, I-90 was scheduled to start with widening due to some environmental issues that ITD wanted to make sure they were fully going over. That project has been moved to construction for 2025 and is anticipated to be a 3-year project to widen I-90 to 4 lanes in each direction from State Highway 41 to US 95. Also, ITD has planned for I-90 and US 95 interchange over in Coeur d'Alene to be reconstructed at a $92.6 million cost. There's a couple asterisks by that, whereas the current plan, as it's being presented, has the dollars identified for design, but they don't have a guaranteed obligated year for construction on that interchange yet. So more to come in the future on that. And then the other project in there is the I-90 Greens Ferry Road overpass, which is here in Post Falls. There are some repairs that are needed on the railing of that structure, and we have also asked ITD to take a look at some minor issues on the retaining wall on that structure, and that's $1.9 million scheduled for 2025 construction. That's, oh, and then one last little item. We always talk about painting roads and how long it takes, and not a lot of people really wonder how expensive is it to paint a roadway. I kind of liked this little stat. Taking I-90 and painting both directions of I-90 from the Washington state line to the Montana state line, it costs the taxpayers of the state $730,000 a year. Quite a bit of money, but very important to utilize the road safely. Stan, if you have any questions on this, but it really was just an overview to educate you on what goes on with the state.
A couple comments. Excited to see the Pleasant View 53 interchange being improved. We drove that the other day, and it's a death trap, especially with railroads, with the trains going through. It's awful, so I can't wait to see that improved. And you referred on a few occasions to the Post Falls Highway District, and I hope, I want people to understand that Post Falls Highway District is not the city of Post Falls. I received a letter 2 weeks ago from a lady politely asking, actually maybe criticizing some road work, and I started looking at the street, and it's actually in Rathdrum. And it was a Post Falls Highway District project, and she was wanting to express her frustrations with the city of Post Falls. So we sent hopefully we sent a polite response, but Post Falls Highway District is not part of the city of Post Falls. They have their own projects.
We get that quite a bit,
Yeah.
where people have a Post Falls mailing address, so they assume that we take care of their roads.
Yeah. That's good information, Rob. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next up, mayor and council comments. I have a comment. Councilor Malloy, we miss you. As I hope all of you know, Joe was hit on his motorcycle on his way to work. We thank God he was not hurt seriously. He's not in good shape, but it could have been significantly worse. And I told him he and I are going to have a little discussion about him riding a motorcycle when he gets better. But I would ask people to bear in mind, especially during the warm weather, people are on motorcycles, and it is dangerous. And if we all know, we saw Joe come to meetings with his full gear with reflective yellow jackets and pants and helmets, and so we know Joe is safe. He hit a car, went over the hood, and he called me last night, and he sounded good, but it's going to take Joe some time. So, you know, Joe, if you're watching, hopefully you're not, hopefully you're resting, but you're in our prayers. Get better soon, and let us know if there's anything we can do for you. But more importantly, please be careful as you drive, and keep motorcyclists, bicyclists, and children at the top of your mind as you're driving, and hopefully prevent any more instances such as this. Council comments.
I do have a question. Mr. Seal, maybe you can help me. Is there an acreage limit on cottage homes like there are for tiny homes? I couldn't find it. No? Okay. And then I did maybe want to ask city staff and council if there would be any interest in limiting the amount of R3 and then also tiny and cottage homes that is allowed in our CCS developments. Currently, developers or builders can get a special use permit for those zones and then are able to build out completely residential in what is zoned kind of, it's named a commercial zone. And in the interest of small businesses and keeping a vibrant economy that can keep up with all of our road work and maintenance, I would be interested in just looking into our options of maybe making some edits to that to see if we can promote a little bit more commercial in those areas. And then also in our CCM zone, as far as I could see, it looks like multifamily is limited to 50%. But I would also be interested, since cottage homes and tiny homes are a little bit newer product, if we could add those into those zones as well. I know that I don't get to make decisions all by myself up here. So I wanted to float the idea and see if the rest of council here tonight would have any interest in asking staff to look into that and bring it back to us to see if those are options.
It seems like a discussion worth having. If we have a zone that's supposed to be mixed residential and commercial, and it ends up being 100% residential, then that would kind of contradict the purpose of having that zone versus another one.
Okay.
You got it?
Yep. Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is we are going through the comprehensive plan project process, and so a lot of those type of things will be identified as we work through that process. And so I'd probably tie it in with that once we decide more about where we want certain things. I think that will
Yes.
guide this whole discussion.
My concern for delaying it with the comprehensive plan would be what the city has brought up multiple times, which is having a group of zones or pieces of land that have one type of agreement with the city. So since tiny homes and cottage homes are a new product and we are allowing special uses or approving special use permits for those products, I thought maybe before we get too many of those approved or we have too many developers that are looking into doing that, we could make these changes to sort of save some of that deviation in those things. So
I got two.
I think it's worth having the discussion.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments? We do not need an executive motion tonight.
We do not.
Next motion is, I'm sorry, an executive session, I apologize. Next motion is?
Adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.